I recognize the peril that an unelected member has on speaking on the matter of elections, so I hope to confine my remarks to non-partisan issues. The elections process must give the government of the day a clear mandate to govern. I believe this bill does reflect the government's intent to ensure elections in Singapore are efficient, future-proof, and conducted with integrity. But we should also think beyond the next general election. How will future politicians use or abuse these laws, and how will our history as a democracy be shaped by this bill? So let me start with the problem of history. Clause 2 proposes that changes in electoral divisions may be published as maps online for public viewing instead of in written detail in the Gazette. This is good for efficiency, but it may unintentionally harm the historic record of changes in our electoral divisions. The Gazette is a permanent part of our history, and it cannot be readily altered or destroyed, but materials that you publish online have little permanence. Internet links break, websites go down, documents can be altered or deleted without notice. We cannot even predict whether the internet will exist in the form we are used to today. Many of us grew up using microfilm readers for research. Our children do not. Our grandchildren almost certainly will not even know what microfilm is. But printed work has somehow stood the test of time. Now, scholars will use the Gazette in the future to research how our electoral divisions change, how that affects representation, how that affects outcomes in society and the economy. Let me give you just one small example. There is a paper, The Political Economy of Housing Prices, published in the Journal of Housing Economics in 2010 by Eddie Su and Wong Wei Kang at NUS. This paper studies how electoral boundaries affect housing prices. I leave it to members to make guesses as to whether government or opposition wards enjoy higher housing prices. I hope this will encourage you to read more academic papers. Sir, the matter of electoral divisions changing does affect a large number of voters. In an article dated July 24, 2015, the Straits Times calculated 1 in 5 voters were affected by redistricting ahead of the 2015 GE. Nearly 1 in 3 were affected by the 2011 GE redistricting. So a change that is so consequential should form a reasonably future-proof part of our historical record. Before I move to the second issue, that of repolling in the event of a lost or destroyed ballot box, I note that I realize a similar debate took place during the Presidential Elections Amendment Bill in 2017. There are some differences though, so I do beg your indulgence. So I think this problem of Clause 19 is how do we minimize the political costs and risks associated with an election. So Clause 19 proposes if just one ballot box is lost or destroyed from a polling station, then all counting of votes from that polling station must be abandoned. If the margin of victory is within that number of uncounted votes, including overseas electors, then a new poll must be conducted for that station. Sir, a new poll costs time and money, but it also creates political uncertainty. The identity of the government may well hang in the balance of that one polling station. So let us ask, how likely is it that an election will require repolling under the amended bill? Now, the Elections Department informs me there were 832 polling stations in 2015 GE, and there were about 2.46 million eligible voters, and there are typically between 2 and 4 ballot boxes in each polling station. Now, that is an average of 3,000 votes in each polling station. Now, suppose that by some disaster, one ballot box is lost from every single from every single electoral division. How many repolls would we have to conduct? So I did some calculations for the last 2 GEs. It turns out in the 2011 GE, the margin of victory was slim enough in 2 SMCs that they would have required repolling. In the 2015 GE, it was 2 SMCs and 1 GRC, which would have required repolling. Now, obviously, SMCs are more likely to require repolling because the margin of victory is more likely to be within the number of votes in one polling station. A polling station on average will contain about 11.5% of the electorate for an SMC and about 2.4% of the electorate for a GRC. Now, we are accustomed, of course, to the present government winning elections by large margins. This may not be so in the future. As margins become tighter, the risk of a repolling event does rise if a ballot box is lost. Now, sir, how can we improve on this? The question is whether the lost ballot box represents a random sample of the votes cast at the affected polling station. After all, votes are generally cast into a ballot box in no particular order. Polling procedures can further improve on this by ensuring that voters who arrive as groups and who may vote similarly, such as families, are to split their ballots between the boxes randomly. This is in any case good practice. Now, if the votes contained within one ballot box are actually missing at random, there is no issue in counting the remaining votes from the affected polling station. The procedures described in the bill can apply in the event that the margin of victory still remains smaller than the missing votes from that particular ballot box. I understand this clause was adapted from the Presidential Elections Amendment Bill in 2017, but you see, Mr. Speaker, these issues are unlikely to affect the presidential election because a polling station contains less than 0.2% of the votes in a presidential election. It's a much larger issue in a parliamentary election. Now, the last point I want to make is that Clause 19 also does reserve powers to the minister to decide how these procedures are to be carried out. And of course, this may create the appearance of a conflict of interest. When Parliament is dissolved, the incumbent cabinet does hold office until the first sitting of the new Parliament. Therefore, the minister's ability to form the government may well depend on the outcome of this single polling station. In another country, the results of a recent general election were unclear until well past the midnight hour. There were rumors of political interference there. So I would suggest we consider reserving these powers to the returning officer to avoid any appearance of partiality. The same applies, of course, to the Parliamentary Elections Act itself, where Section 102 reserves the power to the minister to make regulations regarding the act. I expect that we have no issue with this during the term of government because the voters have clearly given their mandate. But there is this particular issue arising between the time when Parliament is dissolved and until the new Parliament first sits. Sir, the government must be seen to have a clear mandate to make decisions on behalf of all Singaporeans. I'm not criticizing the integrity of the government or of members here today, but this is a law for the future. We would hope that future generations would act with integrity. We hope they act exactly as we would. But should we write laws that depend on critical moments, on future office holders acting only in the best interest of the country? I share with this government the view that our laws should be written in the long-term interest of the country. On balance, I expect the bill will achieve that objective, but I hope the government will be able to address some of these concerns.